Hello guys, welcome back to this amazing YouTube channel where we share various tech or IT information which we feel like they're useful for us to grow our IT career. So if you're new here, you're so much welcome. Remember to check on my previous videos, please watch them. Kindly also consider subscribing. If you're watching right now and you haven't subscribed, kindly consider subscribing, and please share the videos as much as you can to your friends, to your peers, your colleagues, and each other person you feel like they'll be, they like the videos. And also remember to leave a like on each and every video. I'll really appreciate that. So in this video today, we are going to talk about what infrastructure as code is. So my current role is container management. So remember guys, in my previous videos, I've been talking about being a planning and evolution engineer. So recently I kind of transitioned my roles to now container management, and what I basically do is to make sure that containers are running as expected, so that the applications running in those containers can continue running without any downtime or any degradation of service. So these are the containers in different environments like Kubernetes, OpenShift, and AWS EKS. So I think I'm going to talk about this transition because I feel like it will encourage someone, because I know there's someone maybe looking out to maybe get into a different role or maybe get some skills to enable them to get a job in a certain field. So I think in my next video, I'm going to talk about how I managed to transition from being a planning and evolution engineer to now being in container management. So one thing about IT which I really like is that it's all about you taking that initiative of improving your skills. So every time you need to make sure that at least you're acquiring a new skill, and especially if you're looking for a job or there's something that you're looking or you're desiring to be maybe in the next few months or years. So it's really important that you keep upskilling, you keep looking for knowledge in that particular area. And if there's anything that you can do like certification or just making sure that you do, or even a project, anything that can show that you're really working hard in that particular area and you would like to get a career in that particular area, that will really be important. So that's not the topic of today, but I really think I'll talk about it in the next coming video. And also I talked about how to self upskill. So if you really want to know how to get started by upskilling, or making sure that you're acquiring some knowledge at least each and every day, kindly watch that video and remember to give a like if you feel like it's helping you in one way or the other. So back to our today's video, we are talking about what is infrastructure as code and how is it useful to system administrators. So I've given a very straightforward definition. I think you can see on my screen. It basically means managing your IT infrastructure using configuration files. So before these configuration files, or before IaC came into being, most of actually everything was being done so manually. Like when you needed some servers, you had to provision one server at a time very manually, and if you needed to install an application in those servers, then you had to do them very manually, one server at a time. And you can imagine if you had a very big production environment, how long that will take you. And apart from even deploying the servers and installing an application, there's the management of that application in terms of maybe updating your application or doing anything like changing some parameters of that application. You still have to do that manually. And for a scaled application, for example, if an application is running in like 5 servers, like a scaled application, then you had to go into one server at a time. You log into one server at a time, change the configuration, go to the next server, change the configuration. So it's really, it was kind of time consuming, and also definitely a lot of people will be needed if that work had to be done fast enough. So now with infrastructure as code, you simply use configuration, just one configuration file, and you send the instructions to the different environments that you are working on. For example, if it's AWS and you want to create servers, maybe you want to create 10 servers, you just use one configuration file, send to AWS, and the servers will be provisioned. So the configuration file will take care of everything that you want to provision. Just make sure that you put everything that you need in that particular configuration file. Then you send it. If you need 10 servers, you just say 10 servers in that configuration files, and all your servers will be provisioned. If you want to deploy an application in all those 10 servers, you still use a configuration file, maybe something like Ansible, which is mostly used as a configuration management tool, and you send the requests or your needs, which are outlined in one file, to the servers that you want to provision your application in, and the application will be provisioned in all those servers. Whenever you want to do like a change, just update your configuration file and you set it again. So what will happen is that the configuration file will look at what is already there, it will skip, and then it will just provision what was added or what was changed. So that is really, really nice. And you can also take down the whole deployment just by using that one configuration file, instead of like before you had to go and it to each and every server and install the application and things like that. But as of now, once you're using this infrastructure as code thing, you can actually destroy that whole environment using that one configuration file. So that's really the advantage of using infrastructure as code, and it has really, really come handy for system administrators. A lot of work has been reduced, a lot of time has been reduced that was being taken to do all those deployments manually. So that's the advantage of using infrastructure as code, and I hope that gives you like the general understanding of what infrastructure as code is. So there are different tools that enable us to perform this, to do infrastructure as code, or rather to use the configuration files to do our deployments. So one of them, so in this file, you can see I've also outlined, what was happening before IaC, where you had to directly access your server, do your things manually, and things like that. And then I've also outlined the benefits of now using infrastructure as code. So you use configuration files to achieve all the above, all the things that you are working on. Of course, less time is taken to provision the environment. Ease of updates, I've said, once you want to do an update, you just change what is in the configuration file and you deploy again. So what happens is it will not start deploying from the start. It will only check through the difference, what was there and what is added now, and it will just work on the difference. You can reuse the same configuration on over and over again. So once you write one configuration file, you can save it. The next time you have a deployment, you can reuse the same application. If it's maybe the environment will be a bit different, or maybe the application will be a bit different. The only part you need to change is the part that conforms to what you're doing now as opposed to what you're doing before. Otherwise, you can reuse the same configuration files over and over again. And also with this infrastructure as code, I've said there are different types of infrastructure as code tools that can really come handy for you to work with. And there are those which are specific to some environments, and there are those which can actually work for different environments. One of the, in this file of mine, I've given the most commonly used IaC tools. There are many, but these ones are, I think, the most commonly used ones. So one of them is CloudFormation. So CloudFormation is specific for AWS. So it's used for provisioning resources in AWS. So remember, AWS is a cloud environment. So once you want to create servers in AWS, you want to provision your EC2s. Remember, when you're doing an EC2, or maybe you want to deploy an application, for example, you have maybe a web application which requires a server, which is an EC2 in this case for AWS, and probably you need a database with maybe an RDS, and definitely you need networking. So there's a VPC which will really come handy in there, and definitely the subnets in that VPC. So you can actually give all those information in a configuration file for CloudFormation, and then you just send to AWS, and all those things will be provisioned for you. So once you have that, you've given your specifications very clearly. Like you say, you want an EC2, and you give the type of the image that you want to use, and the the templates for the EC2 that you want, like the 2 micro, things like that, or you want a large one. All those things you have to specify in that configuration file, and then you send to AWS, and the CloudFormation will take care of everything that you've specified in that configuration file, and everything will be provisioned for you within very few seconds. So so as you can see in my screen, I've just given some very basic definitions. It's a service that helps you to model and set up your AWS resources, which I've already explained. So you can create a template that describes all the AWS resources that you want. So you describe everything that you want in that particular template, and then now you send to AWS, and CloudFormation will take care of provisioning everything for you. So with CloudFormation, you can actually log into AWS, and you'll find the template for CloudFormation, and then you can fill it from there. You can also just write the configuration files on your machine. Just use any text editor on your machine, and then make sure that when you go to the console of AWS, you select the template, or rather the configuration file from your machine. So once you select from your machine, CloudFormation will pick it, and it will use it to provision whatever you've written in that particular configuration file. So that's basically for AWS. So for the lovers of AWS, so if you're working with AWS most of the times, you need to try CloudFormation. It would really, really come handy when you're provisioning any environment in AWS. And you can see I've said, you sometimes you need to have a number of servers for you to deploy something. And I've just given a very good example. A web server needs an EC2. It needs to be having some networking. So there's a VPC and the subnet, and definitely you need a database. So you specify everything that you want, and then it will definitely provision all that for you. So the next thing for you is just to deploy your application in the EC2 servers. So another one that is also just the same as CloudFormation is Azure Resource Manager. So it does the same thing, but definitely in the Azure cloud environment. And also in Google, we have Google Cloud Deployment Manager. So those three, I used to deploy resources in those specific cloud environments. So if you're working with AWS, consider checking out CloudFormation. If you're working with Azure, consider checking out Azure Resource Manager. And if you're working with Google, then you need to definitely check on Google Cloud Deployment Manager. And these configuration IaC tools are specific to those cloud environments. Now, you may be asking yourself, then if you're not working with AWS and you're not working with Azure, what other tool can you use that can at least give you that ability to use other different environments, like if you're working with OpenStack or Kubernetes or GitHub and things like that. So Terraform is the tool that now comes handy. Terraform doesn't can I say discriminate? It doesn't, it's not for specific environment. It works for every environment that you're working with at that particular time. So it works with AWS, it works with Azure, it works with Google, it works with any other environments like OpenStack, as I've mentioned, works with environments like Kubernetes, OpenShift, GitHub, any other environments that is not, that, these others can't work with, like CloudFormation and Azure Resource Manager and Google Cloud Deployment Manager. So when you don't when you want to use a specific tool like the first three, then you definitely use Terraform. And Terraform is really, really great. It's very simple to use. It actually works in just write your configurations the way you want. Then you use something called provider. So provider is now the environment that you'll be working with. So if you're working with AWS, then your provider at that point will be AWS. If you're working with Azure, your provider will be Azure. So that's the thing that specifies the environment that you're working with. So if it's OpenStack, then your provider will be OpenStack. So then it will know that these are deployment that's going to happen in this specific environment. So Terraform is really, really nice. Consider checking it out if you need a tool that can work in different platforms without you having to use a specific tool because it's a specific environment. So from what I've written here is a HashiCorp product. So it's an infrastructure as code tool that lets you define both cloud and on-premise resources in human configuration files that you can version, you can reuse, you can share. And it can manage low-level components like compute, storage, and networking resources, as well as high-level components like DNS entries and software as a service features. So Terraform comes really, really handy. It doesn't discriminate any environment. You only need to know how each provider is configured. So if it's AWS, just search for how AWS provider is configured for Terraform. And the good thing is that all this is available on the internet. So there's a lot of information available for Terraform, and they also provide very, very nice examples that you can use. So if you're working with AWS, you can actually find a whole example. Like they have these things called modules. So when you say you want to provision AWS EC2, you can actually find a whole module for EC2. So just pick it and come and plug in your configuration file. You don't even have to research a lot because that module is already written everything. So you just have to change the kind of the EC2 that you want, the size, the type, side things, but you have the whole the structure as it should be just from googling it from Terraform website. Now another tool that really come handy, and it's mostly being used, is Ansible. So Ansible is mostly a configuration management tool. So I've used Ansible most of the times, but when I'm deploying applications. So for example, if I want to deploy an application like an Apache web server, in a remote environment, I use Ansible, and it really comes handy because you specify everything that you need in that configuration, just like Terraform and the rest up there. But for this one, it's mostly for application. So if you want to deploy a specific application, you write what we call tasks. In that, they use what we call playbooks. So in a playbook, you write your task and the roles and the task that you want to be done in the servers that you're going to deploy your application in. And then the good thing about Ansible is also it's very, very simple to use. It uses pure English. So you don't have to have any coding experience. And it also doesn't require you to install anything on the client servers. The servers that you're going to deploy your application in, you just have to be able to access those servers through SSH. So one thing that you really need to do is maybe ensure that you have that SSH connection from where your Ansible is installed, the Ansible server, where you've installed the Ansible application, and the servers that you're going to deploy your application in, that you're going to deploy now for example, your Apache web server in. So it just requires SSH connection. So unlike in other tools which I've seen that you need to install something like a client in those remote servers, it really adds some task on your head. But Ansible is really nice tool, simple to use, and at the same time doesn't require you to install anything on the remote servers that you're managing. So it's really important that you check out how Ansible works if you haven't, and you can actually start deploying applications. So for example, if you want to deploy an application in like 10 servers, a web server to run in like 10 servers. You just have to configure hosts. So hosts are now your remote servers that you want to install your application in. So in a host file, it has like a host file where you put all your servers, and you have to make sure that these host servers can be reached through SSH. So once you have your host servers and you have your configuration files where you've said you now want to install this application, and it's really simple to use. So check it out if you haven't, and learn how to use Ansible to manage your deployments on remote servers. Another very nice tool is Chef. I haven't used it. I think I used it way back. I haven't tried it again, but I know it works just like Ansible. The only difference is that Chef require something to be installed in the client servers. You have to install like a client on the servers that you want to manage for you to be able to reach from the server that you've installed your Chef to the servers that you want to install your application. So it's also a really nice tool. Just like Ansible, as I've said, it works the same. The only difference is that you need to install an application on the remote servers. Like now, they're now the client servers. So that's the difference. So these are the ones that I found that they are mostly commonly used. And guys, these tools, if you're a system admin, or you're a DevOps engineer, or you want to be able to just do your automations, these are the kind of tools that really come handy. And the moment you start learning one tool, you'll realize how things are really connected. For example, you learning something like CloudFormation, then definitely you need to understand AWS and the resources in AWS. You learning Azure Resource Manager, that definitely means you understand how Azure works, the resources in Azure, and you can actually provision those resources using configuration files. Something like Terraform, you'll actually go further to understand how Terraform can be used in different environments. So that's what I'm saying. In the IT environment, you don't limit yourself to one thing. So if you want to provision servers in AWS using Terraform, you can do that. And then you can actually go to an extent of learning, how can I still provision the same servers in an environment like Azure, or in an environment like OpenStack? And you see, at that point, you'll actually have extended yourself to learn something else. And that's why I say self-upskilling is really important. And every time you're doing something, make sure that you actually stretch to learn something extra that can help in future, because it's not always that you're working with AWS resources, or it's not always that you're working on your on-premise resources, because sometimes you maybe get a role that is using public cloud resources. So that's what I'm saying. Once you learn a tool like Ansible, for example, you'll actually be using Ansible to do your own, provisioning, but you'll have to go to an extent of learning. Now, how can you merge Ansible to work with CloudFormation, for example? Because these things can work really well together. Because if you use CloudFormation to provision the environment first, then you need a tool to also provision the application. So you can actually combine the use of CloudFormation with Ansible, and you have the end-to-end deployment and management of your environment. So that's what I'm saying. Don't limit yourself as an IT person in IT. Make sure that you're always expanding your knowledge to try out these things. And if you're not working with this already, don't wait until you say, now I want to get a job in an environment where now I can apply my IaC tools. You can actually start practicing. As I've always said, these things, it's always something that you take upon yourself to say, I want to learn something and I want to grow learning something. So you can provision your own infrastructure using something like VirtualBox, which is really simple to install. Have a small server running Ansible, for example, and have some other 2 servers that you can use to test your how Ansible works. So once you install Ansible in one server, then you can try to deploy a simple application like Nginx in those other 2 servers and see how it works. And that's how we learn. And there's no difference actually when you're working in a production environment, because the only thing that you will change is probably the application that will be installing and maybe some other features. Remember, now when you go to a production, maybe you start incorporating features like security. How do you want to run your application? Which user do you want to run your application? Are you going to run as root, or is there a specific user that has root privileges? So those are some of the things that you learn now, slowly going forward. So don't limit your don't wait until you get a job that can help you to use these things. You can start learning by yourself, slowly, and that's how you grow, and that's how you get to show that you have something that you can at least get a job or a role somewhere. And what I always say is that once you do a small project, it's okay to add in your CV. That's what I usually do. If I do a small project, for example, what I've talked about, having like small servers in a virtual environment like VirtualBox, and you deploy an application using Ansible, and you make sure it works, that's enough for you to add to your CV, because it's not any different from what you'll do actually in the production environment. So when you know that you can explain, you've understood it really well, then add it to your CV and make sure that you can actually show that you've understood how this thing works. So that's all about infrastructure as code. So this is just like to give you like a base. Of course, you need to understand how CloudFormation works. You need to understand how each and every of these tools work. This was just about mentioning what infrastructure as code is and some of the tools that really come handy, and the most commonly used tools when it comes to infrastructure as code. So I hope it was helpful, and consider giving this video a thumbs up, and also please subscribe. Consider subscribing, guys, because we need this channel to grow. This is just about learning. I feel like it's just okay to share what you know, and help another person to grow. And I'm also open to learning from other people. I'm one person who really loves learning, and that's why I also feel like it's good to share what I know. So that's it, guys. Thank you for always coming back to watch my videos, and please consider subscribing and sharing my videos. Until next time, goodbye.